chase I need, no chase I need, no chase I need, no chase.
We are the only group who do not get compensated.
Message.
I mean, there's groups and there's people who've been compensated due to radiation claims. You got people still getting paid off the Exxon oil spill that happened back in the 80s. But you know who did get reparations? White folks. The slave masters, the slave owners. You know why? Due to loss of property.
Message.
Another thing, a lot of people don't know this. Many historians don't really talk about this much, or they probably don't really know it. Frederick Douglass actually fought against reparations.
Message.
He didn't want reparations. Although he's one of the greatest black leaders of all time. But he did not want reparations. And it was due to the mama bird theory. The mama bird pushes the baby out of the nest. It either flies or it dies. Frederick Douglass' ideology was about sink or swim. He didn't want his people to be dependent on his money without knowing anything else. He said, we were dependent on white people for so long and wanted us to understand that this was going to be a rough process, starting from scratch.
Message.
During the Reconstruction period, Frederick Douglass was against reparations. We had no jobs, no animals, no land, no tools, no weapons, and very little education. As him being the #1 black leader at the time, he hurt our chances for reparations. Do you know how much money the Holocaust survivors and the Holocaust victims have received and still continue to receive? Do you know how much money the Hispanic people have received? Do you know how much money the Native Americans? You know how much money the Asian people got? Hell, just recently, we had to stop Asian hate stuff going on, and they immediately got money. If I really unpacked all the money that these other groups receive, this would be about an 8-hour video. I mean, most of this stuff, literally, I mean, damn near all of it, you can look it up. We all have knowledge at our fingertips. Pull your phone out, look some of this stuff up. Type in this. Type in U.S. government to pay $492 million to 17 American Indian tribes. This article is from 2016.
To understand why there's a call for reparations, there needs to be an understanding of the scale of slavery. It was a crime against humanity in which around 400,000 people were forcibly brought to North America. Over the centuries, 10 million enslaved people were legally treated as property in the United States, brutalized and ruthlessly exploited for free labor, which was used to establish the country as a leading global economy. In fact, one historian estimated that by 1860, enslaved people were, quote, worth some $3.5 billion, making them the largest single financial asset in the entire US economy. That's around $115 billion today. When slavery was abolished in 1865, 4 million formerly enslaved African Americans were freed, but through their forced labor, they created billions of dollars in generational wealth for their captors and none for themselves. Back then, the US government understood the need for reparations and passed an order to distribute 40 acres and a mule to all formerly enslaved families so they could build wealth and financial security. However, after the assassination of Abraham Lincoln, President Andrew Johnson vetoed the allocation and returned the land to former slave owners. One way to reckon with America's past and current wealth disparity is through reparations that close the racial wealth gap.
You should make direct monetary payments to the eligible recipients.
That's economist William Darity. He co-authored the book From Here to Equality, which outlines one of the most comprehensive plans for what material reparations could look like.
So we estimate that this would require an expenditure of approximately $350,000 per eligible recipient. You get a figure of approximately $14 trillion.
Reparations for the crime of slavery and its legacy have long been a subject of national debate.
I don't think reparations for something that happened 150 years ago for whom none of us currently living are responsible is a good idea.
And I think they're using what academics would call the theory of distance, that something is too far in the past to have contemporary application.
Another thing that I hear is slavery was so long ago. How do we repay something that happened so long ago? There was an event called the Trail of Tears. This happened in 1831. And the 5 civilized tribes all received reparations. And those early casinos didn't start popping off until about 100 years later. I mean, there's people who receive reparations that dates back further than that.
Message.
There's treaties from the 1700s where other groups still getting paid. So I don't want to hear nothing about slavery being so long ago. And to be honest, we don't even have to go that far back. Jim Crow, segregation, mass incarceration, the crack era. I mean, there's just so much to name. We don't even have to go back to the 1800s. We really don't. When we get something, it's always some trickle down benefits. It's always some shared benefits. It's always some people of color type of talk. It's always black and brown people. It's always black people and so. They could potentially go off of people who checked African American on job application or any other time you may have or may not have checked African American. Like, when did you check that box? That would be ridiculous. That would be insane to go off that. Everybody is getting broke off except for the people who built this country. The people who actually laid down the foundation to this here country. All of these banks were funded through slavery.
Message.
New York Life, Chase, JP Morgan. Do y'all know the history of the real JP Morgan? Trillions upon trillions of dollars is owed to the ancestors of the black people that's here. But everybody get money except for us. And people call this a handout. This is not a handout. This is what's owed. We're talking compensation. Everything with us is some watered down, trickled down, shared benefits. Even when they are completely wrong without a shadow of a doubt. No way to dispute it. Even situations when we don't have to go back 100+ years. You got events like the Tuskegee experiment.
Message.
You know how much those people got paid? $10 million. And we're not talking about 10 million each. They split up $10 million. And they got an apology from Bill Clinton in 1997. An apology.
During these years, researchers and doctors told poor black men who signed up for the study that they were receiving treatment for syphilis, when instead they were getting vitamins and placebos, leaving the disease to spread unchecked. Over time, the men got sicker and spread the disease to their partners and even their children at birth.
So it's easy to see why Congress has yet to pass H.R. 40, a bill that was proposed all the way back in 1989. It would set up a commission to study and consider a national apology and proposal for reparations for the institution of slavery and its subsequent racial and economic discrimination against African Americans. And while you cannot place a monetary value on slavery and its lasting effects, there's a precedent of reparations programs compensating victimized communities directly. Back in the US, the Civil Liberties Act of 1988 designated $20,000 payments to Japanese Americans who survived internment camps during World War II.
The U.S. government has also made payments in instances where it was not the culpable party. Payments made to families that lost loved ones during the course of the 9/11 attacks, as well as payments that are being made to individuals who were held hostage in Iran at the end of the Carter presidency.
Up to $4.4 million per hostage or their estates. In the case of slavery, the US government did promise reparations. It's just reneged on it.
Message.
In fact, when the US finally issued an apology for slavery, it included the disclaimer, "Nothing in this resolution authorizes or supports any claim against the United States or serves as a settlement of any claim against the United States." Nor did the US ever provide true reparations, a process consisting of 3 things: acknowledgement, redress, and closure for grievous injustices.
It's vital that the federal government issue an apology, because that will create the justification for the redress plan that follows.
That brings us to who would actually receive reparations. Those direct payments would go to the roughly 47 million Americans who identify as black. But under Darity's plan, the requirements are a little more strict. First, black Americans would have to have identified as black, Negro, African American, or Afro-American for at least 12 years before any reparations plan goes into effect. And they'd have to prove that they had at least one ancestor who was enslaved in the United States.
Let's say $60,000. Now, it's going to be more than that, but let's say $60,000. $60,000 for each person who deserves reparations. It can be spread out in moderation. It don't have to be $60K right up front. It could be $60K over the course of 10 years. It could be $60K over the course of 6 years. However they want to do it, we can spread it out, and that fixes the issue of inflation right there.
Message.
Reparations would have to be to the descendants who were promised 40 acres and a mule. Reparations would have to be based on lineage. It has to be. No other way they can pull this off if it isn't. It has to be. Otherwise, we run into stuff like a white person being born in Africa who's now an American citizen. Well, hey, I'm an African American. I deserve that money. You see, we run into stuff like that. So it has to be based on lineage. It has to be from the descendants of the people who were promised that money and who's owed that money. That way, we strip away the ability from people coming in trying to claim benefits that they do not deserve. Thanks for watching. Make sure you hit the thumbs up, make sure you subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comment section. Please follow the History with No Chaser Facebook and Instagram pages.